up your engine. Now, people are always looking for a good used SUV. Here is a 2007 Trailblazer LS. It was purchased 3 years ago for $3,000, and let's see how it's held up. Well, the body's still in decent shape. They put the smoked headlights on, and they painted the rims, and it's raining, so it looks dirty, but it's still in solid shape. Does have a few dings on the door here, but he bought it that way, and in 3 years, it's still there, but there's no new ones. You can't blame the truck on that. It was the first car for a 16-year-old, and it's old school. His father bought it for him for $3 grand, and he's paid him all back. Working at a Pizza Hut here in Tennessee. America is like it used to be. People actually doing things the right way, not just handing things away, paying for them, paying them back, working it off, and now he's going to college. He got another vehicle, but this thing has served him pretty well. He's put 20-something thousand miles on it, and it's got that great straight 6-cylinder engine, the 4200. These engines, they can run and run. Now, as you can see, got a timing chain, so you don't have to mess around with a stupid timing belt. And yeah, the 6s don't put out the horsepower of a V engine, V6 or V8. They're very dependable, and they're smooth. They're a naturally balanced engine. Now, it's got over 100,000 miles on it, but it does not burn oil. They're well-made engines. And he may have been a young guy, only 16, but he was smart. A lot of the young guys, they want to get the V8 and go roaring down the road. Not having all that horsepower for a 16-year-old. These are relatively high-up vehicles. You can have a less tendency of flipping them over, too. In fact, his father put all new shocks all the way around when he got it because he was worried it was high and he was going to roll it over. So if you're worried, you can always do that. You can always put higher quality ones on if you want. You can even put off-road ones on if you want. Being a GM product, there's an aftermarket up the wazoo for these things. You can do whatever you want. They want more for cosmetic stuff, but you can do whatever you want, as much or as little as your wallet or mind can afford. Now we'll take a look inside. It's got a pretty conventional inside. Cloth seats that are still in decent shape. So let's see how it starts up. Starts right up. It does have the check engine light on, but that's because the thermostat's stuck open. He needs to put a thermostat in it. You can see it has 200,000 miles on it, but we'll put it in gear. Still extremely smooth. That's the one advantage of those straight 6-cylinder engines. Now, this is a 4-wheel drive vehicle, front and rear. And unfortunately, this is very typical for GM vehicles, the transfer case doesn't work, so it's only rear-wheel drive now. On the plus side, it didn't work when he bought it. He knew it didn't work. And the advantage of this system is he just never puts it in all-wheel drive. It runs perfectly fine. Of course, it uses less gas that way too. This particular system, this isn't like an all-wheel drive modern one where they drive all four all the time. And if the transfer case goes out, whoo, you're going to be spending a ton of money. As I'm always telling people, hey, don't buy a 4-wheel drive vehicle if you really don't need it. Well, in this case, it has it and it doesn't work. But he doesn't really need it in Nashville, so it worked out fine. So he got to buy it for $3,000, and it runs perfectly fine. As you can see, they got tons of room. These are great people haulers. All kinds of space in here. Nice big trunk. Pull up the seats. And I'm too lazy to pull everything else out, but you get the drift. You get all that out of the way. You got a lot of room for hauling stuff. And if need be, you can tow 4,500 pounds with one of these things. And the transmission in this one has been extremely reliable. It had the typical problem that these do. GM uses crappy high pressure lines on the transmissions. The high pressure line blew, and it cost them a couple $100 to replace the line, but it didn't damage the transmission. We'll take it for a spin and check it out. Got a cool sunroof, well, a cloud roof today. The heat and the AC still work perfectly fine. He was 16, so he added a much better infotainment system here than what it came with. You can see it idles really smooth. Now let's see how it takes off. It's extremely smooth. It's not a race truck, but it's got a very nice power band, and you can barely feel this thing shift. And that's with 200,000 miles on it. And yes, the 4-wheel drive doesn't work, but as long as you don't use it, it's not going to have any problems because the transfer case is not engaged unless you turn it on this design. Like I said, if you had an all-wheel drive vehicle and you couldn't turn it off, whoop, there go thousands and thousands of dollars. You bought it this way, it still doesn't work. No 4-wheel drive, but the normal drive, you can see how smooth it shifts. And it's very smooth. Squirting bumps on this old country road. I feel very comfortable. I'd have no qualms getting this thing driving to California. It's a very comfy ride. Okay, so 3 years and 3,000 miles later. Did it break down much? Well, the high pressure hose broke. He did have to put tires on. And here's a lesson. His father said, let's put the cheapest tires we can. So they bought these Chinese knockoff tires. And guess what? Less than 15,000 miles later, the metal from the steel belts was starting to poke out of the tire. That will tell you. Listen to Scotty. He knows what he's talking about. Well, at least when it comes to cars. Don't buy the cheapest tires unless you don't care. Unless you're selling it right off. Or, okay, heavy vehicle, you got 15,000 miles. Maybe it's going to be a toy for you. Moving stuff around, picking up things, going to the country once in a while. If you're only going to put 3,000 to 4,000 miles a year on it, there's nothing wrong with that. Because after 6, 7 years, most tires are going to start dry rotting anyway, and they're not safe. But if you're going to drive normal driving, you don't want to buy those cheap Chinese tires on a heavy vehicle unless you expect 15,000 miles to get all you're going to get out of it. And of course, worry about flats. I've seen more people buy them, get flats all the time. The rubber's too cheap, nails pop through them too fast. Get decent tires. It's got Cooper tires on the back now. And an interesting story on that, his brother is in the tire business. He got him those tires for free. Somebody had them on a vehicle that made them rigid. It wasn't the tire's fault. There was a problem with the other vehicle. They bought new tires. And when he first got it, the ridges, he could feel it. But now, this shows you how good the tires are. Now that they're on a truck that's aligned right, it wore the ridges off and you rode in it, it rides really smooth. That shows you how well made those Cooper tires are. They made it through a bad vehicle, now they're on a good vehicle, and they ride good again. You never get that with Chinese tires. Sometimes you want to do a little research on tires. It's one of the cheapest ones out there. That just makes common sense. But overall, I'm not a GM fan, but straight 6-cylinder engine, this thing, he says it's been the best thing that happened to him. He paid it off, working at a Pizza Hut. Now he's going to college, got another vehicle, and he's now selling this thing for $2,000. And let me tell you, if you want a nice vehicle, you ought to get a hold of it for $2,000, something that runs this smooth. Sure, it's got a couple 100,000 miles on it, but those straight 6-cylinder engines can go 2-3 times that. Plus, to add to it, this is the first generation that didn't have all those fuel pump problems that GM's had, where you had to drop the tank, change the pump, and had to put a new wiring harness, sub harness on it because the wiring harness was melting and stuff on it. This thing still got the original fuel pump and it's still humming along. So now you know the truth about this 14-year-old Trailblazer. $3,000 3 years ago. He'll easily get $2,000 for it now. So he loses $1,000 for driving a vehicle 3 years. Sounds like a pretty good deal to me. The whole setup, a kid getting his first vehicle, paying it off, working at a Pizza Hut, now he's going to college. Hey, that's what this country was made to be. It's a shame that a lot of people have drifted far away from this model, but here in Tennessee, there's still people that believe in that model, and this is a perfect example. And here's some bonus questions and answers. Farmer boy with a PH, I like that, says, I changed my tires to winter tires on my Lexus RX 350. I noticed my consumption in liters per kilometer has doubled. Doesn't normally do this. I recently did some towing of a trailer, and of course there was increased consumption. Of note, I'm not sure if the actual consumption is higher, just the reading. Odds are it's just the reading. You change the tires, the size of the tires are different than your previous tires. The computer doesn't know that, so the reading is going to be wrong because it's going by how the wheels spin, how what the reading is, and say these tires are different size. That's going to change the reading to the computer, but the computer doesn't know the tires are different size, so assuming your gas mileage is going to change. If I were you, what I would do would be fill it up, take it on a trip of, at least a couple 100 kilometers, you must be living in Canada, and if it's about the same as it always was, it's just the reading and ignore it, because those readings aren't that accurate to begin with. Now, if you really want to get into high tech, you could go to a Lexus dealer and they could see the size of your tires and they could reprogram the computer and yada yada, but then when you went back to the regular tires, you'd have to reprogram it again. So that's just what happens with those modern complex computer systems when you start changing the tires. There's too much involvement in it. There's too much technology. And when you add different tires on it, then they'd have to be reprogrammed. Too much craziness. I'd just say ignore it. You're probably getting the same exact gas mileage you got before, except it's winter and it's colder, and the gas mileage always goes down in the winter because it's colder. It's less efficient. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.